It's no secret to many people I know that Hyperlight Drifter is and probably always will be my personal favorite game of all time. What many of these people don't ask is why. So that's the reason I'm here making this very video, to answer the question nobody asked and create this homage to Hyperlight Drifter. I will begin by dividing the contents of this video into four main components: soundtrack, gameplay, environment, and this game's rather compelling storyline. The very first greeting you get from Hyperlight Drifter's opening menu is the eerie and distant beats of music introducing you into the game. Along with games such as Dark Souls 3 and Minecraft, Hyperlight Drifter's opening music gives you a feel of the type of game you're going to be playing. Dark Souls 3 lets the player know exactly what sort of game they are getting themselves into as soon as they load up the first screen of the game, through nothing but the brilliant piece of music that is presented. If that doesn't exhibit the hell you're going to have to endure throughout that game, little else can, except of course the gameplay.
I'm fucked. I got fucked. I was fucked. I was fucked from the start. Alright. Great. Fantastic.
Another example I had was Minecraft's opening menu theme. It unveils Minecraft to a new player as a peaceful and relaxing sandbox game.
So it goes into the mountain here, and then I'm gonna have like a go around all the way.
Wait,
and then it's gonna drop down. It's gonna be super sick.
So if we return to Hyperlight Drifter's opening melody, we get overtones of tranquility as demonstrated in Minecraft's opening theme. But as one progresses through the game, you realize that this is definitely not the case. By the time you're engaging in rage-inducing boss fights, the music has transformed drastically from the impressionistic, calm style the game was greeted with in the beginning. As we start a new save, we are presented with a cutscene. Unlike most developers that try to convey their game's plot through dialogue, Hyperlight Drifter's creator Alex Preston accomplishes this with visuals and music alone, with the help of composer Richard Freeland and the other members of Heart Machine. While I'll delve into the storyline of the cutscenes later on, for now I want to focus on how perfectly Disaster Piece's compositions accompany the visuals of the game, and not only the cutscenes. Hyperlight Drifter is fantastic at being able to put the player in any particular mood through its soundtrack. From exploring dark woodlands to fighting giant evil frogs, the soundtrack is able to relax or excite the player based on what is occurring within the game. While most games can accomplish this relatively well, Hyperlight Drifter and a few other well-respected games are special in that they can use their soundtracks to complement both calm and intense situations tremendously well, whereas games such as Dark Souls 3 only really gets you ready for a fight using its soundtrack. Granted extremely well, and Minecraft, along with most other sandbox games, can only create a feeling of passivity through its OST. However, it's not necessarily a bad thing for a game to focus on one intensity of music. Obviously, with cases such as Minecraft and Dark Souls 3, one of the reasons they became popular and are as good of a game as they are is because their soundtracks fit so perfectly, just as Hyperlight Drifter's soundtrack is perfect for it. Hyperlight Drifter is able to create this feeling of passivity when necessary, but completely switches its intensity when the gameplay demands it. At the same time, this game's music takes the player on a journey through its interpretable storyline. The mark of a truly terrific game is often its ability to complement a magnificent soundtrack to high-quality gameplay. Examples of this having been done excellently are David Jaffe's God of War, Bethesda's Skyrim, and of course, Alex Preston's Hyperlight Drifter. The game introduces you into its game mechanics quite straightforwardly. After the initial cutscene, you awaken on a cliffside, and small tip bars are shown to you in the corner of the screen as you progress down the pathway. If you have played any RPG or adventure type game, then the ability to use these controls would come quite easily to you. At the end of this pathway comes an underground tutorial, at which, at the end of it, you are able to use your sprite companion to open elevators and doors, swing a sword, drift, and shoot your first gun. After this, you reach the surface once again, and continue onto the true game. Throughout the game you collect gear bits, although you can collect a lot more than the game directly gives you by looking for secret gaps in the walls and using the help of your companion to find secret platforms, which, once 4 of them are collected, you'll earn your first full point of currency. When more full points of currency are collected, you can use them to buy additional abilities and weaponry. Some things you cannot buy, however, such as new guns, which can be obtained after defeating the 4 main bosses, as well as 2 hidden in secret areas around the map, as well as 2 Switch exclusive range weapons, for example the throwing sword. The game definitely rewards you for taking the time to search every crevice in the map. Different outfits, gear bits, keys, which can later be used to open closed off doors, and as mentioned earlier, certain guns can be found in hidden areas of the map. Once you have equipped more than one gun, have extra drift and sword abilities, and additional weaponry such as bombs, the game becomes much more difficult as you have more factors to control all at once. All the while knowing it is entirely possible to defeat a difficult enemy by drifting, shooting, and slashing, along with using all the abilities on top of the basic moves at the perfect time. Once you reach the boss rooms, you will find that it has its own unique environment, forcing the player to adapt. An example of an element that stands out in making you change the way of your playing in some main boss fights are using the plant beastlings that the Emperor regurgitates against the boss by using their after-death explosion to stun the boss. When the Hanged Man is smashing its hammer towards you, hide behind crystals holding crystal knights to destroy the knights that the boss would otherwise summon. If fucking anybody can figure out what I have to change in my tactics to beat this absolute Jesus, he's just a fucking ripoff of the Archer. Couldn't come up with a fucking better name at least, damn. If you do die often, even with using extra abilities, it's usually easy to pick up where you went wrong, and therefore work around that. A good quote I picked up while revisiting the tutorial section of the game through YouTube was by a channel named Game Soup. As the man speaking went through the basic controls of the game, he said, "Easy to pick up, hard to master," which I think is an excellent way to describe Hyperlight Drifter's gameplay as the playthrough progresses, along with all the added factors. Hyperlight Drifter tells a story, a fascinatingly interpretable one at that, but what carries you from cutscene to cutscene of the main plot is the beautiful landscape surrounding your character. Starting off with the previously mentioned stormy cliff face, all the way to the very final path you walk nearing the game's final cutscene, Hyperlight Drifter is constantly walking you through an ever-changing, beautifully pixelated landscape. The first real vista you come across presents itself in the early stages of the game, the view of a distant city, resembling that of the one in the game's opening cutscene. More on that later, and giving the player a faraway spectacle of what they will soon call home. Just by playing through the game on a casual afternoon, regardless of your progress in it, there will always be something to marvel at, whether it's an abandoned giant robot looming in the distance, or the aftermath of crystal warfare atop cliffs too far to climb up to. Even the terrain has a somewhat ethereal feel to it, as if the creator had put personal effort into every crease and crevice, which isn't entirely false, as the secret item and challenge areas had to be cleverly placed at scattered locations around the map. It is also clear that I am not the first one to notice how well the environment is structured to accompany the narrative within this game. Comments on Hyperlight Drifter's story or music videos make this fact obvious. The enemies you fight in this area inspired something in me I honestly haven't felt for anything or anyone in years. Smoldering hatred. And the bodies. Oh god, the bodies. They skinned them alive, flayed them while they were still conscious like they were some kind of unthinking animal. What the fuck? Who does something like that? Needless to say, I enjoyed visiting their own slaughter upon them. I hope their leader rots in hell, the fat, greedy monster. I remember starting the game, going east, and so I discovered the game here, and died quite a lot. Yet every time I finished a hard passage or beat a hard group of enemies, this music was here to kinda comfort me, I guess. It just felt so peaceful, calm, and made me feel safe, really. This area is such a bizarre mix of abject horror and tranquility. The horrible genocide and maiming of an intelligent group of civilians, all set in a calm and serene area with pleasant yet melancholy ambience. Every time I saw the tortures the amphibians inflicted, I got sick with disgust and anger. Yet, as I walked through the other tranquil parts of the area, I felt unnaturally calm and serene as I cut down enemies. In the moments of looking around and backtracking, the sight of cut down corpses of both the ferret people and the frog people made me feel neutralistic, as the calming ambience and the music cooled me down. This song right here is one of the many reasons why I adore Disaster Piece's music with all of my heart. It's so serene, so vivid, so nostalgic. The sound triggers my memory and brings back visions of me and my friends messing around in the woods in my backyard. He knows exactly how to pluck the heartstrings and race minds with visions created by these sounds. This, along with Wisdom's Tragedy, is my favorite song out of the entire OST for this severely underrated masterpiece of a game. In particular, a user by the name of Toot Thunder Thighs took it upon himself to give a brief but vivid first-person narrative on almost every Hyperlight Drifter track on YouTube. It's all so quiet, so peaceful. Only the water and wind disturb the silence the statues of white stone impose on this aquatic landscape. Not that you mind. The coolness of the breeze is pleasant, even if the smell of blood tinges in the air. Where is everyone? You've already found him, the titan whose eyes dig into yours from the bottom of the sea he's in. But he's not what you're looking for. Looks like you're gonna have to spend a longer time here than you anticipated. It's quiet. Very quiet. The birds are silent. They know something is up. You would love to wander around and enjoy the serene scenery, but you also know that staying in one place too long is going to allow whatever's watching you from behind those trees to plan the next nasty move on you. You swear this was the right way. Was it? Oh dear. You're here. It knows you're here too. You've gone so deep, deeper than anyone has gone before, and it's still going down. This thing, it observes you, stalks you. So many threatening visions, nightmares, and now you're going to meet it. You're not ready, but you keep going on your way. There's not much time left. Why does this place look like an abandoned facility? The way in which the 4 main bosses are introduced to the player is through wordless contact with 4 NPCs along your way east, north, west, or south. The images presented to you give a better introduction to these bosses than any words could. The final sector of the game is neither north or south, west or east, but is under the surface of the main hub of the overworld. Firstly, the eerie elevator you travel down is surrounded by darkness, accompanied with pink flakes floating through the air like a poison. You are then greeted by a flight of black stairs, which descend into a small clearing. Here you find the creatively designed doorway markings, which signals to the player that a boss room is approaching. The boss room, which will become to be their last major struggle in besting Hyperlight Drifter. Clearly, so much time is put into the design of Hyperlight Drifter's over- and underworld environment, letting the player use their surroundings to their every advantage.
I think players are generally smart people, and I'm tired of games that hold your hand. I think games like Spelunky and the Dark Souls series are great at what they do. They're master level games, and they assume that players have some modicum of intelligence.
Since Alex Preston was born, he has suffered from a defect known as congenital heart disease and will continue to battle it for the rest of his life. Luckily, he persevered onward to creating what he was proud of. He was an animator for many years before he began his most well-known project. His past experience with animation and his want to create a game as a means to, quote, tell a story I can identify with, expressing something personal to a larger audience, so I feel more connected and have an outlet for the many emotions that crop up around life-altering issues, end quote. Combined with his love for games such as The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and Diablo, pushed Alex to create a game that, including his favorite elements from these 2 games, would come to be Hyperlight Drifter. The Drifter suffers from a disease too. Accompanied by vignette visions, Hyperlight Drifter's opening cutscene shows a blue-skinned warrior glitching into a stilled river turned red, in which lays piles upon piles of unidentifiable corpses, seeming to have caused the river's color. Then, the corpses follow the Drifter's example and glitch out of the stream, leaving the Drifter alone with his sickness. The Drifter then battles the sickness throughout the remaining part of the cutscene. As it morphs into monsters and beings the Drifter must fight. This is a continuing theme throughout the short cutscenes you are presented with as you progress through the game. The Drifter is defeated in every contact he has with this manifestation of sickness, until you, the player,
are able to trudge your way to the very final boss room in which this disease guards the wellspring. More on that later. Many theories have cropped up around Hyperlight Drifter and its storyline. An official lore has never been published by Heart Machine or Alex himself, and so the players and theorists are left to interpret what they can from what we are given. This is what makes Hyperlight Drifter's community so unique. It allows them to be creative in their interpretations, and when the founders of the game do find these theories on subreddits or YouTube, none of them I've come across have been approved or disapproved by the company. They are only given their sly remarks and allow the community to keep on theorizing. And in truth, those are the types of storylines I prefer in games. The types you have to decipher based on fleeting images of characters you know nothing about. The types where the storyline is not handed to you through dialogue straight and simple. The type of storyline that can be interpreted by the individual. A game of your own. With that being said, I'm now going to introduce what my interpretation of the game's storyline is. There was a race of peoples, known as the Librarians. These peoples created the Titans, which by the time the Drifter arrives have been destroyed and are decaying. Over a seemingly long passage of time, the Librarian race falls, almost all of its members perishing, and what's left of the Titans are found by the Drifter, like I said before. I like to think that the Titans they created and controlled achieved such a sentience that the Librarians could no longer compete with the intelligence and the power the Titans had over them. A war broke out between the Titans and the Librarian race, and both sides lost. The Librarians were almost completely wiped out, and the Titans were somehow shut down. The Librarians created the Wellspring, and used it to power the Titans and harness immortality, which would make sense as the god of the four nations is a black jackal, or Anubis, the god of the afterlife. The Wellspring has now fallen into the hands of Judgment, a being who now has access to the most powerful object ever to be created. Judgment initially uses the Wellspring to erupt a massive explosion, killing many animal beings who live atop the surface. Judgment also uses it to reanimate the Titans who live atop the surface, who begin again by wiping out the remains of the four races in spite of their defeat in the battle against the Librarians. After creating immensely powerful cannons, the animal beings managed to beat the Titans. They lost many themselves, however, and Judgment still holds the power of the Wellspring. From here, the Drifter comes into play. To dominate power over the Wellspring once again, Anubis sends the Drifter a vision. This vision is what begins Hyperlight Drifter. Now, this is where my theory splits. I will begin with the theory I think would be most widely accepted, and then move on to a more shaky one I think less would believe, but one that I have faith in. But as the Drifter receives a vision from Anubis, he receives a terminal illness from Judgment, one in which Judgment's form manifests itself in the sickness of the Drifter. But how? How does Judgment just come out of the pink blood the Drifter coughs up? How does he seem to have no real effect on the Drifter after he seemingly kills the Drifter time and time again? And how can the Drifter seemingly have no effect on Judgment when he strikes at Judgment with his sword? The Drifter only had any real effect when he confronts Judgment in his chamber. So I present the theory that Judgment never left his chamber at all. Just like the visions the Drifter receives from Anubis, the sickness was planted by Judgment the same way Anubis planted a vision, and is only in his mind, his infected mind. This infection, just like Alex's, will follow the Drifter until the end. His final moments in that infamous chasm, an inverse scene of that where the Drifter awakens, will be the last peaceful moment he has ever granted after defeating Judgment in the rune that holds the Wellspring. The walls then cave in, and from there on no peaceful moments of any kind will be had by the Drifter. He has fulfilled his duty. As his final reward, the Drifter is granted one last vision, a vision of the land after Judgment has been defeated, one of peace and tranquility. The Drifter is a dead champion who has restored the Wellspring to Anubis. And here is the other direction in the fork in the path, my other theory. The Drifter receives a vision from Anubis. Anubis, the one who enslaved the Librarians as their god, and forced them into creating the Titans and the Wellspring. Once Anubis had power over the Wellspring, she let the Titans gain sentience, allowing the Librarians to perish against their own creation. The outcome of a victory, loss, or draw of the Librarians against the Titans didn't matter to Anubis, for she has total control whilst in possession of the Wellspring. Although from the ashes of the battle against the Titans, the Librarians form their last attack against Anubis, seeing the betrayal against their peoples. Their last attack is in the form of a being named Judgment. The intelligence Judgment is granted with is one that can compete with the Wellspring Anubis holds. Judgment's intellect overrules that of Anubis, and he defeated her in a battle of mental struggle with each other, severing her ties with the Wellspring. Judgment then encases himself within the underground laboratory in which the Wellspring lies. Anubis realizes that she cannot harness the power of the Wellspring, and that it is too powerful to be held by a being not two created by the Librarians, not even a god. So she sends the Drifter a vision. She implants a mental sickness sickness too, an infection which she created to look like that of Judgment. The Drifter acknowledges his task and seeks to complete it, like some before him, although he is the only one to reach the end. Once the Drifter enters the chamber in which Judgment resides, protecting the Wellspring from Anubis, he attacks Judgment, as it is clearly the infection that he has seen and been plagued with throughout his journey. After Judgment's last cry echoes throughout the chamber, the Drifter is somehow compelled to destroy the Wellspring. The immense energy released from the Wellspring causes the chamber to collapse. Anubis is at the foot of the chamber, waiting, watching. She leaves the Drifter to die as she exits without him. Plagued with a sickness, and now knowing what he has truly accomplished, the Drifter lays down. He has fulfilled his duty. The Wellspring is destroyed, and Judgment is no more. But the Drifter is no champion on this fork in the path. He is a cold-blooded killer who has been deceived by God and who has doomed the 4 races to repeat the fate of their librarian ancestors. For without Judgment's protection, Anubis will enslave these races as their god once again, and create new titans and another Wellspring better suited to her power. I know that was a lot to take in, but those were my interpretations of the game's story. And the best part is, you can play the game for yourself and decide on a story too. And based off all you've heard and seen over the course of this video, I think you can believe me when I say that Hyper Light Drifter is a game to remember. I hope this homage to its brilliance has proved that to you.